Hello and welcome back to the Atheer AR Insights webinar series. Today we have something very timely and quite thought-provoking, a discussion between Donald Brady, a principal in Deloitte Digital focused on delivering human-centric solutions to enterprises, and Atheer's own Chief Operating Officer, Patrick Bischoff. They're going to talk today about moving from reactive to proactive digital transformation, a topic that couldn't be more timely given the challenges that so many enterprises have faced in 2020. And I'll turn the conversation over to you, Patrick, to begin the discussion. Thanks so much to both of you for being here.
Jeff, thank you so much. Thanks for the introduction. Donald, thank you for giving us some time today and participating in the webinar series of Atheer. And welcome to all our viewers and listeners. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. I hope you will enjoy what Donald and I are going to talk about. Maybe you can take some insights away from it, maybe some valuable information as we talk. We'll conduct this basically as a fireside chat. Donald and I will ask some back and forth questions, discuss some subjects, and then keep the last 10-15 minutes for Q&A for everybody to ask questions, but feel free to ask questions during the Zoom session, and we'll try to answer them as much as we can and follow up afterwards. We'll keep the session to an hour. So let's don't waste any more time and start with maybe a couple of questions about the industry at large in the AR, VR, augmented reality, production optimization space. So Donald, again, thank you for spending time with us. When you talk to clients these days, what's top of their mind, especially organizations that are in manufacturing or having significant field operations for maintenance, for deployment of whatever products they're doing? What are they thinking about? What concerns them? What's their strategy that you're experiencing these days?
Thank you, Patrick, and thanks for the invitation to join you today. Looking forward to the conversation. I think this is a great question to kick us off, Patrick. We have a sort of high-level framework that we've been using at Deloitte to just think about the stages of the ongoing pandemic, and that really is one of respond, recover, and thrive. And I think today we're very much in that recover phase where manufacturers and others have gone through a period of reacting to the developing situation. They may have gone through a period of deploying remote expert capability to be able to better socially distance, keep their equipment running, reduce travel costs, keep people safe. And now they're really thinking of building on that kind of a foundation and using augmented reality more widely across a broader set of use cases.
So that's very interesting. Let me just hone in a little bit more. Are there particularly strategies that you see as a global organization? Your customers are global, they're diversified. Do you see actually any difference between different regions in the world? That's one. And do you see a difference in the thought process of your enterprise clients from 9 months ago? Is it just an acceleration of something that they already thought about? Or is it something that they're just thinking about because of what happened?
I think this is an acceleration of what they were already thinking of, Patrick. At least among the more innovative clients, they were already considering or using augmented reality within the innovation function. You may have had organizations already deploying it to some degree or experimenting with it. And COVID-19, I think, has been an accelerant. And I think, that's not a new insight. Everybody's saying the same thing, that COVID-19 is driving acceleration, driving further desire for transformation. So I do think it's an accelerant. To your point about global versus US adoption, I do think that global firms are adopting this, or rather, let me me phrase that again. Firms that have a broad global presence are looking at this very much as a way to alleviate some of the considerations around safety. They're looking at it to drive savings in travel costs. They're looking at it to increase collaboration on a global basis. So I think they are thinking a little bit more broadly than maybe just some folks who have a particularly US-centric approach to the adoption of technology.
Interesting. So it's innovation-driven. It's global, if applicable and necessary. So my question, specifically to you at Deloitte and your clients, when do you usually come into the picture in the discussion with your clients? Is it when they sit down at a whiteboard and they're planning a new digitization or Factory 4.0 strategy? Is it more during the time where they're evaluating use cases, hardware, software, what application, or is it when it goes into the phase of how do we integrate this into a broader spectrum connectivity to ERP systems, change management, and so forth? Is it the whole portfolio, or are there some specific points where you guys are focusing on?
So we're seeing it everywhere, Patrick. We get pulled into conversations with innovation teams who are, kicking the tires on the technology and looking to help their organizations understand it, deploy it, and make use of it. But we also get pulled in when there are large transformational conversations as well. That may mean rolling out Industry 4.0 capabilities more broadly. It may mean transforming how the field force works. It may mean transforming how manufacturing is working. So it really is all over the board or the spectrum. And I think that's a function, obviously, of our size and presence in the marketplace, the types of clients that we advise and work for. It's really hard to categorize it.
Okay. That makes perfect sense. And interesting enough, I think we're going to get to that point later on again when we're talking about a little bit about the implementation and transformational process that an organization has to go through. I'm curious if you are experiencing a similar kind of situation that we at Atheer sometimes see, and that is when we start early with our prospects and interested customers, we often have to actually reset the conversation at the very beginning because they have fallen into something that we would call a technology trap. And what I mean by that is that they have gotten so excited about a hardware component that they might have seen and the capabilities of that component that all of a sudden the focus of implementing this is from a hardware perspective, and sometimes the original use case and the problem that is to be solved gets lost over the excitement and the love for the new technology. Is that something that you are experiencing too?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is an amazing industry to be involved in, Patrick, and it's hard not to get excited about the technology. It's hard not to get excited about the cutting edge of augmented mixed reality. Hard not to get excited about the technologies that surround it. It's such an exciting domain. So we do see people falling in love with the tech, and we also take an approach of taking a step back, asking the why question. What is the business case? What is the problem that we're trying to solve? And what is the right set of technologies to bring to the problem? It's not just AR. You can't really deploy AR in isolation and expect to get a really high rate of return. You have to look at the overarching problem to be solved, bring in multiple technologies, and that's really where you get the return on investment that our clients are looking for.
That's interesting. That actually mimics a lot of our experiences, that it's so essential to actually get the first use case right. and not, even though the technology works, the implementation is fine, but the infrequency or the velocity of the use case happening actually even correct is kind of dampening the original excitement. Is that something that that you guys not struggle, but advise your customers on too, that it's really key to focus on the original use case and what they want to solve?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've run into situations where, you know, our clients have been kicking the tires on using augmented reality on, say, asset management or maintenance procedures, where the frequency of those procedures just isn't sufficient to justify the investment, Patrick. And I do think it is important to pick a use case that is a real challenge for the client, is as frequently occurring as possible. You do want that sort of high incidence of usage, because you're not just looking to deploy a solution to solve the particular problem. In the case of augmented reality and related technologies, you're also looking for a broader learning opportunity within the organization, the ability to deploy, test, learn, take those learnings back and reinforce and improve the operations across a broader set of use cases.
I couldn't agree more. It's very interesting. What we're seeing is also there is a shift from the original excitement about the remote experts and the remote troubleshooting, and in itself, that use case has a high velocity, high frequency application, and then something that happens once in a blue moon, right? If I'm an automotive manufacturer and I'm deploying something like this into my dealership network, there's not a dealer that doesn't receive tens, if not hundreds of cars that come in for maintenance or recalls or troubleshooting or something like that. And then the original poster child AR case, so the see what I see, becomes frequent, high velocity, and it's a perfect match, right? But if I'm deploying it on a factory floor and I have a $10 million machine that is producing XYZ for me, if that machine breaks down every couple of weeks, then my fundamental problem is actually a different one than if I'm using remote see what I see to get some expert assist on how to fix the machine, right? But in both cases, the application, the hardware device, the software that runs on it may work perfectly, but the effect and the use case and the ROI is vastly different.
Yeah, we spend a lot of our time trying to tease out the right use case for our clients, and to really hone that business case, because you do have to have the right level of executive support within clients to be able to successfully deploy an AR initiative, or what we at Deloitte call a digital reality initiative.
And when you talk about digital reality, is it just AR, or is it a combination of a lot of these new technologies that are emerging and are now actually getting a foothold, especially in the factory floors and in the field services, anything from your AR to VR, but we're also talking about machine learning based on the metrics that can be gathered, AI integration, how does this all connect to edge computing and 5G? Any insights on that? What do your clients think about it? What do you guys think about it?
Yeah, we do cover the spectrum of XR, Patrick. We do things like immersive learning using VR technologies, and usually that tends to materialize more in sort of high consequence scenarios where there's an element of danger or adverse outcomes that might occur when performing that task in real life. Using VR is a great way to allow employees to really develop muscle memory, and there's lots of statistics that talk to the efficacy of that training. It covers AR, and again, we use a phrase called learning in the flow of work. using AR to help you perform the job, whether it's faster, more accurately, get it done the first time. But then also the technologies that go hand in hand with that from a future of work perspective. And that's things like, to your point, computer vision, how to weave that in into a solution that really meets the needs of the client. IoT, I would also put in that box with connected machines,
Yeah.
tying the data coming out of those, making that contextually relevant information readily available to the worker, whether it's on an iPhone or a mobile device or even an HMD. Those are some of the technologies that we're weaving into transformation efforts.
I think in particular, and you mentioned it, the word contextualization is key, because the relevance is I want help at the location that I'm at with the job that I'm doing while I'm doing the job, which may not be necessarily training. I might just need some guidance, but it needs to be context-related guidance to what I'm supposed to do, rather than here's some remote access to your entire knowledge database, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that leads you into bigger questions of how you actually roll that technology out, how you give it to the field, how you develop new capabilities as an organization to support it and enhance it, and to your point about integration earlier, how you weave that into your existing systems.
Quick question on that. It seems to me, and I've been with Atheer now, I know the company since many years. I've been working with them since August of last year, and I'm seeing a shift in who we're talking to when we're having discussions with prospects and even clients. It used to be a rather tactical problem that was in the forefront of somebody that runs a field organization. It seems to us now, and I can speak by experience, I'm talking more often now on a strategic level with a COO, a CIO, a CTO that looks actually at the system more of, is it globally deployable? Is it scalable for my entire organization? Because I want information not only in the hands of the people that have wearable devices, I want to have it in the hands of thousands of people for different workflows and use cases and so forth. And then automatically it becomes a strategic IT project rather than a tactical solution. Is that something that you see on your side too, that there has been a shift in who you're talking to and who's interested in those technologies?
Yeah, absolutely. I've only been in the digital reality space, full time for the last couple of years, Patrick. So around the same tenure as you, and there's definitely been a move over those last few years of conversations that started, I think, and largely were in the innovation function, to now much more strategic conversations, C-level buyer or at least head of a business unit, or with significant ownership over a large field force or a large operational team. You mentioned auto dealers, very similar to that. There's definitely a maturation that is happening, and that's reflected in the type of buyer that I think we're both talking to.
I think that is the case. I'm also thinking, and this is just me postulating a statement based on our experiences, could very well be that some of the audience have different experiences, but we kind of feel that in our discussions, we're seeing an inflection point. Many of the organizations that we talked with were, they were dipping their toes and were slowly kicking the tires, as you said earlier. What we're seeing is that while many, even very innovation-driven ones, are still just dipping their toes, but it's not just the toe, it's the foot. And when it comes to deployment, it scales much quicker now than it did 6 months, 12 months ago. And I'll give you an example of that. And I was wondering if you have similar examples or experiences. We, for example, have a customer that has 200 manufacturing locations around the globe, and they started with a POC that was sizable and it was divisional. So it was a well-covered project for us. But within 6 weeks, 2 additional departments and divisions actually came that to us, first actually internally, then came to us and basically said, hey, we think we understand what you guys are doing and what your platform is capable of. We have a problem and in this case, we have a problem in Africa, we have a problem in Asia Pacific. We have to get some factories commissioned and live. We can't get our engineers there. Can you expand the POC dramatically and help us out, right? So it's interesting what we're seeing is if you get the use case right, the adoption that we're seeing that happens almost automatically without our influence is interestingly enough, a lot faster than we originally ever anticipated.
Yeah, I think we see similar things. We see successful deployments getting a lot of internal press, if you will, especially when there is that use case match, when there are successful anecdotes and stories that spread within the organization, then you get other business units, raising their hands or asking questions about how to get on board with a program or a similar solution for their particular problem. So we see the same thing. That initial use case is really the critical thing from a success perspective that incentivizes a much larger rollout within organizations. We're also seeing, I think, just the results of organizations making continual investments in sort of their IT infrastructure. So back to the Industry 4.0 topic earlier, where we see organizations deploying Wi-Fi, 5G, connectivity, et cetera, into their organizations and looking to mobilize their workforce. Again, it just provides fertile ground for your platform and for what we do as well.
Interesting. So it's about actually really spending time on getting it right the first time around. And I think what we also see is while there's absolutely a need for kicking the tires and maybe leaving the initial use case in an innovation department, we're seeing faster transformation from innovation to an actual use case. And I think it's where the use case lies and that identification that determines very much the future of the rollout and the adoption. And in saying that, just as a quick follow-up, so I know we've talked about this last year. We actually sat down at Atheer and we published this maturity model. It's a universal digitization maturity model, and we basically sat down and took our experiences, the feedback, positive, negative experiences from our customers, and said the key thing is we wanted to provide a flagpole in the ground for somebody that is thinking about this and these processes and the hardware and the software that goes along with it, and saying, where do I fall in that scale of maturity? Because if you get this right or wrong, it's just as bad if you get the point on the Laffer curve right or wrong. And I'm not going to go through the model for the audience. If you want to take a look at it, it's downloadable. It's on our website. But it's something that we're really emphasizing when we have conversations with our customers of where are you? Where's your organization? Are you just exploring? Are you already really deploying, or are you thinking that you're deploying, but it's really still exploring? Where do you fall in there? Because there are huge differences that make an impact on if it's successful or not, on technology, on budgeting, on how do I evaluate the hardware and the use case. And that's, I think, why it's great to work together with organizations just like yours, because I think it's very relevant for the client to make sure that they're not so excited to make a fast decision because they have a tactical problem in front of them that it will come and haunt them 12 months down the road. But I was wondering what your feedback would be to that kind of a statement.
Well, Patrick, we're consultants, so we love maturity models. We have lots of them, and to the point about transformation. Generally speaking, I think when we're looking at my domain, which is AR and digital reality, and trying to reshape that client conversation. Maturity models are very powerful. They're very effective in letting you know sort of where you are, where your chosen destination might be to make you more competitive or drive that transformation, and sort of laying out steps to get there. I think we have one around what we call digital DNA, which is going from exploring to doing to becoming to being digital, which is sort of a more overarching view of that maturity model, and it lets us think about things in a more holistic sense across the organization, as opposed to maybe just narrowing on digital reality per se. Big fan of maturity models, big fan of using them to help clients really sort of situate and think about the journey ahead.
Interesting. Big fan of maturity models too. I think it's giving good guidance, and it forces somebody to focus their thinking and our thinking of what's the best position to be in and what's the right next step.
Yeah,
Talking
agreed.
about right. Yep. Sorry. Talking about right next step. And you are on the AR space and in the digitization space. I think in the last couple of months, we have seen the feedback more often happening of, hey, this is all great technology, but we can solve this with WhatsApp and FaceTime, and because of the fastness of the decision making that is perceived by organizations, they're cannibalizing systems that are not enterprise grade. They may be not as secure as another system would be. They may be not as scalable, but they are being concocted all of a sudden to be AR solutions because they're creating a video call.
Yeah. Similar
experiences, similar conversations?
Yeah, we've definitely seen that too, Patrick. And I think we're in a once in 100 years global pandemic, and I think folks have been reacting and doing the best that they can with the constraints that they have. So we've definitely seen that same situation play out. Patrick, you literally just described it, using commercial tools to conduct remote expert sessions without regard to security or concerns around privacy, etc. So we do see that. I have a degree of forgiveness for folks dealing with that pandemic, but obviously you need to mature to the point about maturity models we just covered. You need to get onto a system that does sort of guarantee security for your employee as well as for your clients. You need to mature in terms of the privacy considerations around this technology, because you are capturing video potentially. There's all sorts of considerations that need to be taken into account, and new capabilities actually built out within these organizations to meet the needs of an AR deployment.
The way I look at it, sometimes it's like you just rolled over a nail on your tire, and yes, the quick solution is let's patch the tire and get to the next gas station. But at some point of time, you need to change the tire as a whole.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Because you want to drive a couple of 10,000 miles on that going forward. I think an interesting subject also, as our clients' use cases grow and as they transcend the see what I see scenario, we see a lot about, and we have discussions about, the power of integration. And that's a lofty statement, but what I mean by that is, when you look at large organizations, the ones that you're working with day in, day out, and the ones that are our clients, they have complex enterprise platforms. And they have integrated a lot of things, and they have optimized processes and procedures and so forth. But when you look at the field organization, the factory floor, then that still is almost a white spot when you look at it from digital transformation there, right? There may be There may be organizations that haven't changed for many years in their processes. Do you see, and do your clients see, that basically the next frontier of how to generate more efficiency in an organization and to utilize human resources and skilled individuals that are in the front line better is actually served with technologies that you are consulting on, that we're providing as a software application?
Yeah, I mean, I think we view this in terms of a few lenses. So, one of our lenses really is the future of work, the sort of connected worker. That's definitely one of the lenses, the Industry 4.0 lens, the technologies that are coming to bear now that let the worker do things in completely new ways. They take costs out of the system. For example, the use of RPA to drive efficiencies where there's a lot of human make work, if you will. The use of augmented reality, computer vision to supplement the employee. The image here shown about maintenance of jet engines is a primary example of that. To deploy those effectively and maximize the potential of the employee, it does require a degree of replatforming, potentially, especially if there's white space, to your point, in terms of lower investment historically in those sectors and those industries. And it does provide a way for us to have those holistic conversations. Replatforming is often required, integration to systems of record often required, and we're talking about folks like SAP, folks like Salesforce, and many others.
So interesting, and very, very much something that is congruent to what we're seeing too. Experience also on our end is that, especially when we're talking with global diversified organizations, we might actually have a conversation with somebody that is building a completely new factory based on the newest standards on a green field, and at the same time they want to deploy solutions such as ours in an organization or a factory that hasn't changed in the last 30 years. Which gets me to a point, and you mentioned that earlier. It's not so much just about the technology. Let's just assume whoever produces wearable devices and applications, that they work, right? But to be adopted and accepted and create the ROI for the company, it is all about, at least from our perspective, and I wonder what you have to say about this, it's all about the change management. It's how do I generate the adoption of the new technology on actually the shop floor? How do I help achieve success? And that sometimes is maybe the low entry is through the mobile device or through the tablet, because I don't need to have a hands-free solution. But do you think actually that change management is as important to introduce these kind of new technologies than the technology itself?
Yeah, fundamentally, digital transformation is a people issue, Patrick. That definitely is our perspective. These are amazing capabilities. There's a need to transform and manage change, both at sort of the enterprise level in terms of the ways that companies are organized, the ways that they sort of operate, and the ways that they behave. But that's also true on the shop floor as well. You're actually changing how people perform their job on a day-to-day basis, and that level of change management, when you're dealing with all sorts of different skill levels, unionized, non-unionized workforces, all sorts of considerations comes heavily into play. And building up a flywheel of positive adoption, organizational stories, outcomes is kind of critical to the long-term success of, or rather the success of any deployment of this technology. It's a people issue.
And I think that actually builds a bridge between what a Deloitte, for example, does, what an Atheer does, because while we can provide the software, we are not the company that actually is on the ground for months to come to help with the digitization, the implementation, the transformation, and the likes. So almost a natural combination of where entities such as ours can work together. I wanted to segue into a little bit of a different subject. You talked about it earlier, and that was integration at large. So when you're working with innovation-driven companies, you know, they're all about being connected and having connected systems and collaborating on a global basis. So when we launched our newest platform, Aurora, we were thinking about the AR solution as a platform that is universally applicable to lots of use cases, and therefore not providing just an improvement in one particular spot. But I think the interesting part is that learning has to be universally available almost immediately. It's and I think you mentioned that before, and I'd like to hear a little bit more about that when you said, you know, there's learning that might happen in one place. Why should that only be in that one place? I mean, how do we get that experience and that learning, and if it's recorded, and maybe there's a new workflow integrated, and maybe there's some augmented reality annotations on top of a picture, you know, how does that experience that just happened in North America 5 minutes later become available to somebody in Japan?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think there's a few things going on. I think we're dealing with new employees in many organizations. Patrick, we've got the retirement wave that's very much in place. The baby boomer generation is exiting the workforce in record numbers. We've got people entering the workforce who are used to new ways of learning that you know, at my age, I didn't have that opportunity when I was younger. They're used to learning on YouTube. They're learning on platforms like TikTok, quite frankly. And they're used to sort of bite-sized content that is quite engaging. And bringing that sort of philosophy of learning into an organization might be a little bit of a shock for many people. But those bite-sized pieces of knowledge, how do you capture them? How do you identify and understand their value? How do you promulgate them across the organization are big challenges. And I think the platform approach is really the way to go, because you can't go into an organization and expect to be able to identify A, B, C, D, all of the various permutations. You have to give people a mechanism to build upon, a platform, if you will, that lets them discover, learn, and deploy new solutions that we collectively aren't thinking about.
And I think what you just said, it reminds me of a conversation that we had in our last webinar. It's also the discussion about learning with as guidance, you know, bite-sized information to solve an immediate problem right there, which I think is very interesting. And also from a platform approach, you said it earlier, you have to be agnostic, and it's almost an overused term, but when we talk about being agnostic for hardware purposes, for example, and combining it with a platform, I think it's the looking at the problem from the workflow perspective and the process rather than what's the underlying tool that is being used to solve it. Because if I look at the natural flow of work, I might actually be on a AR call on a mobile device first, and I may receive some piece of information that is a step-by-step procedure, or it could be just a video clip, or it could be something, right? And now I'm walking actually onto the shop floor, but my expert who I'm talking with says, hey, you need to climb underneath the machine. And I can't climb underneath the machine because I have this phone in my hand or the tablet. So when I'm talking platform, not only does the platform need to have universal features available, but it also needs to be easily capable of saying, okay, I'm switching from the mobile phone to the wearables because now I'm climbing underneath it and I need my hands free, and I don't want to have any kind of interruption in the call. It should be a seamless sequence. And then the whole thing should, of course, be recorded it should be auditable, and it should be available in some knowledge base if somebody has to do the same process. That's the philosophy from Atheer and how we actually discuss issues these days with our clients.
Yeah,
interesting if that's what you see too.
No, I think that makes perfect sense, Patrick. I think there is innovation happening in hardware, being able to accommodate different types of workers, whether they're a knowledge worker or whether they're a task worker. The need to work hands-free or the ability just to hold a device because you can safely accomplish the task at hand. All of those speak to a need to support multiple devices in multiple operating environments, if you will, factory floor to office space, and they speak to a need for flexibility to be able to meet the needs of a wide client base.
I think we're coming almost to an end here, but it's philosophically the way we're seeing this is good software vendors will lead enterprise implementation, but creative customers will lead adoption and expansion. And what I mean by that is we're sometimes astonishingly surprised by seeing what our customers are doing after they have implemented the first use case. It often turns out that in year 2, that original use case is actually just a fraction of all the other use cases that they're working on. And it's interesting that they themselves come up with those new use cases, and we couldn't come up with them because we don't know their processes well enough. We just give them the tool. Yeah. As an example, we had a client that basically deployed a See What I See solution for remote troubleshooting, and then basically realized that they were still doing pencil and notepad to go through a structured maintenance process that happens every 2 weeks, and said, well, wait a minute, if we digitize this and we can take 2 hours of the maintenance process, that's 2 hours more machine uptime, there's an immediate ROI, we actually just paid for the 3-year deal. And we didn't even know anything about that. So I don't know if you have any experiences where you were talking with your customer about one thing and it ended up that they were implementing something and exploring something very quickly that was completely separate from what you originally talked about.
Yeah, we've seen that, Patrick, and I think it's not uncommon to see that. I think the applicability of this technology, you can enumerate numerous applications of it. We spend quite a bit of time helping clients prioritize and decide on where to go first. But when you're actually in the throes of implementation and you're out there practicing, we practice human-centered design a lot. We go on ride-alongs, we observe. That's a very common way for us to work. The lean word might be Gemba, going to the point of work. Mm-hmm. And interviewing people, and you just discover things that you do not anticipate. These people that are looking to use this capability to get their jobs done, they've been doing it for 20 years, and they just have insights that you can't comprehend from a workshop. So you have to go out there, you have to understand what they're doing, and sometimes they'll make a statement that's it's an epiphany. You're like, oh, okay. That's actually where we should be focusing, because it's such a barrier to you doing your job, and we were not aware of that. It's quite common.
Yep, it's interesting. Similar experiences, and epiphany is actually the right word. We had a couple of those. I think we're almost coming to an end, and then that will lead us into our Q&A session. But it almost feels to me that this industry is, and it kind of gets me back to the mid-90s when I was part of a team that co-founded a learning management system company called Saba. We feel like we may be the builders of a kitchen, and we put the stove in there and the microwave and all those good pieces of equipment. What our clients do with it, if they're going to do French or Italian cuisine, is up to them, right? And I think that is also where relationships and collaboration with organizations such as yours come in, because you're the ones that are actually advising them on the ingredients for the cooking that they need and what kind of cuisine they should focus on, right? So with leading with that analogy, basically, I think Jeff, we should hand it over to the Q&A side and answer a couple of questions. And Donald, I thank you very much for your insights and your comments, and it's always a pleasure to listen to you and the experience that you bring. And hopefully for the audience, there were some nuggets and some interesting pieces that may be valuable for you in your day-to-day. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Patrick.
Well, thanks for a great discussion, Donald and Patrick. We'd now like to ask for your questions for Donald and Patrick in a brief Q&A. So perhaps my first question will be for Donald and Patrick, would be about change management and whether or not that's easier or harder now.
Patrick, do you want to go first, and I'll jump in, or should I go first? I think that this is more in your wheelhouse. I'm happy to support, but I'm curious to hear what you have to say.
Thanks for the question, Jeff, and audience. Thank you for listening today. It was a great session with Patrick, and I hope you found the conversation valuable. I do think change management today is just a little bit harder, quite frankly. There's just an additional element of work that needs to be done to deal with everything that's going on from a pandemic perspective. There's also just levels of stressors on employees. They're often dealing with work from at home situations. It just makes everything a little bit harder. So I do think change management and really thinking about the change you're trying to introduce to the organization and making sure, frankly, that you are considering the employee first and putting their well-being at the heart and center of that change is actually a critical difference. Now it just needs more underscoring from an employee perspective.
I think if I may add something to the question, first of all, I think it's a very, very interesting and important question. We just recently had a conversation with a client of ours that said our challenge is that the front line that we want to deploy the application spans an age group that is between 25 and 65. And one can imagine that there are differences in the absorption of new technology and the willingness to try something new if I've done something a certain way for the last 30 years. And while in the boardroom and on the whiteboard, this may sound fantastic, if it doesn't transfer to the front line, to the factory floor, to the experts in the field, then the whole implementation becomes actually a wash. And so change management is something that we're very keen about. And that's why we're working with partners such as Donald and Deloitte, because as a software company, we can only go so far because there's a lot of a human element involved in getting people actually to deploy and then use that new technology.
Thank you both for that. One of the other questions was about the aviation sector. We had a picture during the presentation of work being done on maintenance on airplanes, and I'm wondering what demand you're both seeing in the aviation sector as they try and deal with a particularly difficult period.
Patrick, I think you should go first on this one.
Very interesting question, and we obviously have seen a change in the aviation industry driven by the situation that we're all under, and in particular that industry. We had some very interesting projects and clients within IATA. We worked with IAG. We worked with several airlines that utilized the technology and tested the technology for MRO processes, for workflows, checklists, and so forth to optimize the transportation side of it, the shifting of cargo, and so forth. So there is definitely a place and something that can immediately bring benefits to the airline and aviation industry. We have experience in that. It is a challenge at the moment because I think the industry at large is challenged. But as a company, we've had experience. We have clients in that space, mostly actually on reducing the time of airplane on ground in terms of maintenance or fixing any kind of structural damage. And it's very interesting because if you are looking at the MRO business, you never know what jet is coming in, and if you're actually having to service a Pratt & Whitney or a Rolls-Royce engine, and therefore that person on the shop floor in the hangar may not actually be the specialist of one or the other, and could benefit from workflows, productivity tools, and a connection to a specialist of the manufacturer or somebody of the airline itself.
I would say commercial aviation obviously is severely impacted by the pandemic, and but it does present an opportunity right now to focus on cost reduction where possible. And I would think also using devices that are already deployed to workers in the MRO use cases. So if you already have smartphones out there, and there's opportunities for cost reduction. Now is a great time to think about that. If you can show and illustrate real savings from implementing a program in this current climate with a focus on operational aspects and costs, it's a really interesting time to see what's possible within commercial airline industry. The defense industry is obviously seeing different macroeconomic conditions, obviously.
Well, we've had a couple more questions in. First one is, as an architect who specializes in MR modalities, will Atheer be occupying the market space that DAQRI, Meta, and HoloLens occupies with respect to on-site visualization and construction design applications? So, Patrick, I'm going to throw that one to you.
Okay, I figured that was going to me. That is an interesting question. So from Atheer's perspective, we're primarily seeing ourselves as a industrial productivity frontline and factory application. So we're a software company, which intrinsically means that we're device agnostic, and we're looking at devices based on the client's use case. We have several customers that are actually in the global construction material business, in the global construction business, that are using our devices. Some of them, and I'm thinking about one in particular, they have less than 50 wearable devices deployed, but over 1,000 people are using the application on a smartphone, going back to change management, low cost of implementation, and so forth. In particular, on if the question is more related to the glasses itself and the wearables, I think DAQRI actually is not actually existing as a company anymore, so we probably wouldn't support them. HoloLens is a very interesting tool, and we would absolutely consider it. And we have a couple of clients that are actually running HoloLens and our application, depending on the use case. So it really depends on what's the size and the scope of the opportunity, because our view is we approach every problem as what is actually the safety, productivity, security, and so forth benefit, and what's the best way and the fastest way to deploy something, rather than starting to peel the onion away from the side and the perspective of what's the wearable device that we want to use. Donald, if you have anything to add on that, please jump in, but I think the question was primarily related to Atheer.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add to that, Patrick.
So the next question, I think you could both probably talk to. It's interesting. It's if I own a national automotive repair group and use the OE repair tools, could your AR platform easily plug into existing knowledge databases? This would help us not require senior level technicians at all locations, but be able to plug into the databases that all locations have access to and direct the junior level techs to complete repairs. So I think you could talk to that, Patrick, and also perhaps we could also get Donald's perspective on that as a kind of a broad scenario.
Donald, if you want me to lead this off, I'm happy to do.
I think this is a platform question, Patrick. Jump in. I have a point to add to it, but this one's yours.
So the answer is absolutely. Automotive repair, maintenance management, recall procedures at a dealer that is owned by a manufacturer or a privately held dealer is very much in the sweet spot of our wheelhouse and our portfolio. We can absolutely, and the platform is designed to connect to any kind of knowledge base that you already have existing. We really view ourselves as a connection nexus, as a middleware platform that connects to your ERP system that may actually generate a work order. It may be your information database that could be Mitchell or something like that. It is our desire, and the structure of the product is to have a very easy integration to already existing knowledge. The key is to actually connect that knowledge to the front line in a relevant and contextual way, so that your technician that has to face a problem is not getting the information served about how to solve something on a Porsche, but how to solve something on a VW, because he or she may actually work on both of them. So the answer is an absolute yes, that is something within our capabilities and core to the product.
Yeah, and all I would add to that, Patrick, is when we look at platforms such as yours, we do look for APIs that enable easy integration into other systems. That's really the key thing. This integration challenge presents itself everywhere.
So the next question is for Donald. And the question is, with the remote expert market becoming rapidly saturated with multiple solutions, pretty much all providing the same feature sets, what differentiators should large enterprises be looking out for in order to make the right choice?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very broad ecosystem in the remote expert use case specifically. When we do evaluations, we look at the client's needs, and they do vary. They may vary in terms of the operating environment. Which dictates the type of device to be used, quite frankly. They may vary in terms of security needs. I think the difference between commercial aviation and defense is a good example of that. The regulatory controls that are present in that industry as well. And then you have to look at dimensions of the vendor's maturity, other things that are important to larger organizations as well. So typically when we do a recommendation or a selection, we would essentially come up with that set of criteria that fits our client and go through a selection exercise with them to make sure that we pick the right solution or the best solution for the need. And we also do see organizations deploying multiple types of remote expert capability. That's certainly not unusual to the webinar's early point about pandemic and people rushing to meet their day-to-day burning needs. But that's really how we approach it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If you allow me to add something here, Donald, it's interesting on our end. What we see is that very often the remote see what I see, which is almost a commodity now, and I thank whoever was asking the question for that question. It is basically a first step. If you look at our maturity model, it's something that we see often, the troubleshooting use case, the remote assist use case. But if you have predominantly a 3-year contractual engagement, then you very quickly actually gravitate And in particular with Atheer, since we're a platform, you gravitate towards productivity, workflows, the connection to your ERP system. It's clients that have a couple of hundred devices that they're using for troubleshooting and remote experts, but they're also running a couple of 100,000 work order processes through the platform that then appear on the mobile phone or the tablet of somebody on the shop floor. So I think our view is that it's absolutely right. The market is not congested, but it's becoming there. It's very much a commodity, but one should look at what is actually the platform that I'm trying to deploy that does a lot more and gives me room to grow and layer additional use cases on top of it than just solving the remote expert problem.
Thank you for that, Patrick. Next question is, which industry segments or corporations are leading the way? And are there opportunities to make the augmented reality's advantages available to less than large non-global companies?
I mean, I'll say from my perspective that it's cropping up in all industries, and you know, I do a number of these talks. I think I've said to Patrick before, I've talked to numerous manufacturers over the course of the last several months, and all of them are deploying this capability, whether it's in pharma or consumer products or industrial products. This capability is being deployed today. You can take a look at the moves of the technology on the Gartner Hype Cycle, where it's been declared as mature. It really is everywhere. I think you're seeing prices of hardware coming down. You're seeing capabilities of platforms increasing, and the ability for organizations to deploy it is becoming increasingly easy. So there is definitely a democratization happening. Patrick, I'd definitely welcome your thoughts on that question too.
Yeah, I think we are covering at the moment 6 different industries, and driven basically by the use case. Several of them are impacted by the pandemic, obviously, but I agree with you, Donald, that it's becoming an implementation or a subject that lots of industries are thinking about. It is something that is universally applicable. It could be a company that has 50 million in revenue to a company that has 40 billion in revenue. And the deployability of the advanced solutions is very different than it was a while ago, especially if you start with a mobile use case and then gravitate to the wearables, then deployability becomes very easy. And especially if you're a SaaS platform, we just recently actually helped a client to go live on a plant commissioning in Asia, where the headquarters is in Europe, the plant is in Asia, several of the experts are in North America. Nobody has ever been there, and we deployed it within a 2-week time frame on a mobile device strategy first, and in the second phase, we're going to deploy wearables. So I think cost is coming down. I think ease of deployability is coming down. It is really about finding the right use case and then managing the change and the implementation appropriately.
Well, and that's a good lead in for the last question we have, which is, when people are looking at digital transformation, is it about features, is it about devices, or is it about something else?
I'm going to say it's about people. I think we touched on that in the conversation. I love technology. I'm a software engineer by trade, but fundamentally, to have meaningful transformation, you need to change the way people work, using capabilities that are presented to them by technology, and that being digital on our sort of DNA framework is really the challenge that many organizations face. They're used to working. Used to being highly optimized to do certain things very well, and the idea of changing their business model or doing creating new business models that better serve their customers is very, very hard. It's about people.
I couldn't agree more with Donald. It's about people. It is about
the features that need to solve your problem, not the features that exist for the fact of the feature existing. Because if it's not helpful to solve your problem, then it's irrelevant to have the feature. It is about productivity and metrics. And I've seen actually a shift over the last 2.5 years. The conversations are different. We're much more talking about what data can you capture, what learning can we get from it, how can I compare productivity, efficiency, effectiveness between plant 1 in one region and plant 2 in another region that is working on the same product or the same processes. How do I distribute a new form of doing something immediately to 80 plants around the world? And I just came up with the idea at my plant in Southern California. And that's not about features. That's about transformation. That's about replacing the mighty pen and paper. That is about tracking metrics and data, and then using that data to actually come up with new ways of using your processes, your operations. It's all about efficiency. And the other thing, because we're living in a global world and most of our customers are global, it is also about security. And in this day and age, it's very much also about safety, keeping your people safe, keeping them safe from traveling, keeping them safe also from what they're doing at the shop floor or on the job site.
Thank you, Patrick. And that's a perfect note to end on because we're out of time. But thanks to you both. And thanks to everybody who dialed into this. We will be sending out a link to the recording of this webinar, and we'll also make sure to let you know about our upcoming sessions in the next few months. Thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Patrick,
thanks,
Jeff,
Donald, for joining us. That was very nice. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
You guys still on here?
I am just finishing the broadcast here. Hang on a sec.